Well, it's been an exciting week in tech. We've had two major outages from two cloud service providers, Microsoft and Google, this morning. Microsoft was a couple days ago, and I think it's very telling. I think a lot of people and a lot of businesses are way too reliant on the cloud. If you don't know me, my name is Brad Nelson. I'm the CEO of FRCS Tech, and normally I film scripted videos in our studio, but right now our studio is filled with e-waste, which is another thing we're going to talk about. But today, this outage is kind of pressing. It has me thinking about some things about the cloud, and I figured I would just make a video about it. So excuse me if I ramble a bit. So if you haven't been living under a rock, you know that a couple days ago, Microsoft 365 had a huge outage that affected basically all of North America, and I think maybe even some of Central and South America as well. They claim it was a load balancing issue. It's been resolved. We don't know if it was a cyber attack or if it was a data center technician unplugging the wrong cable, or I don't know. I haven't heard what the actual cause was, but it was a load balancing problem. And then this morning, we have a major Gmail outage. And this brings up, everybody is so reliant on the cloud nowadays. But what I think a lot of people don't realize is the cloud is just somebody else's computer. You're no longer storing your information on infrastructure that you own. You are renting infrastructure from these big companies. Your files that you save in SharePoint, they're not just in some mystical place called the cloud. They are on a server in a data center somewhere. And that infrastructure can fail, as we've seen recently. A couple days ago, I got calls from clients saying, hey, we can't send emails. We haven't received any emails since this morning. Can you look into what's going on? So my team was looking into that, and it was a big Microsoft 365 outage. And so we had to tell them, hey, there's an outage. There's nothing we can do about it, but monitor the status and wait. And of course, a lot of our clients were saying like, well, but we rely on email for communications for the business. And we're waiting for, communications from people. But all we could do is say, sorry, we have to wait. Thankfully, all of our customers we usually have at least one server on site for our customers, just like at least a file server and backup server that they can work on their documents on. We don't recommend our customers save important working documents in the cloud. That's just kind of part of our philosophy because of this very thing. If our customers not only were using Microsoft 365 Exchange for email, but if they were also using SharePoint or OneDrive or whatever to serve their documents that they were collaborating on, all of a sudden, they wouldn't be able to work basically at all. And I know there's a lot of businesses out there that probably couldn't work at all because they relied on Microsoft 365 Cloud. It's a very convenient tool, but I think we were all sold this idea when the whole cloud services started getting really big and really popular that, oh, check out this really convenient service. You don't have to pay thousands of dollars to have server hardware on site for your business to run your software or to serve your files or to collaborate with your coworkers. And it's super easy because without things like VPNs and stuff, you can collaborate on documents and projects anywhere in the world, basically. And there is some merit to that. There is a time and place for cloud services and cloud storage. But when you put all your eggs in one basket, you end up getting really hurt. And again, in this situation, we had to tell our customers, sorry, all we can do is wait. We can't help you with this one. And that's the same for if a big enterprise had everything on the cloud and they had an internal IT team, that IT team would basically tell them the same thing. Like, hey, all we can do is sit here and wait. I think that's a really dangerous and vulnerable situation to be in as a business. If all your stuff is hosted in the cloud and all of a sudden access to that goes away, you can't work. You can't service your customers. You can't deal with vendors. And you can't make any money. You're losing money through lost revenue. You're losing money through lost productivity because you have two options. You can either continue to pay your employees and cross your fingers that the service will come back up in, 10 or 15 minutes rather than a day or 2 days, or you can send everybody home. I think the right approach is hybrid, like how we have our customers set up, is you have your critical documents and collaboration stuff and any sort of software that you use on a daily basis should be mostly local and then backed up to the cloud. Relying on some non-critical cloud services, that's okay. Like for email, it's super inconvenient to not have email for a day, but it is doable if you can do other work. The other thing you have to consider is putting your data in these cloud services. You're trusting another business with your sensitive information. Now, if you trust these businesses with that sensitive information, or maybe the information you're dealing with isn't that sensitive, maybe that's okay to a certain extent. But if you're in a very sensitive industry like healthcare, how much do you trust Google and how much do you trust Microsoft with very personal and private information of your business and your clients? Again, it's not some mystical thing. The cloud isn't some ethereal thing that just exists that is yours. You are renting infrastructure from these other companies. Now, we've taken a rather extreme approach, and this is partially just because of who I am and how I wanted to operate this business. We are completely independent of any cloud services minus email. We do rely on email or we do rely on Google for our email right now. But this outage this morning has me considering whether or not we should spin up our own email server. But that comes with lots of extra management and stuff. But that might be something that we do. But other than email, all of our computers run some flavor of Linux. We all have our different preferences here. And so I'm running Arch. Some of the other guys are running Ubuntu or Debian. And then our servers run a combination of Debian and Ubuntu server. So it's all open source here. We use open source Office software. All of our internal tools, we used to buy a license for an RMM, which is a remote monitoring and management tool that we use to help service our customers. But we ran into problems with that tool where it would, have some sort of outage. And I'm not going to out who we used to use because they really were good to work with and their product was pretty solid. So don't take me wrong and say that I'm like putting down who we used to use. But the problem is we didn't have control over any of that. We paid licensing fees to use that software and it was all cloud-based. It's really convenient. We'd install an agent on our customers' computers to manage them and all that sort of stuff. But there were some features that were lacking that we didn't like how they worked, or just features missing completely that we wanted. And there were outages. So we changed, we pivoted, and we now use a combination of a few different tools that are all self-hosted. they're all hosted on our servers here at our headquarters. It's helped us to break away from dependence on other people's infrastructure because we've built our own. Now here we're full of techies. We're all IT people. We're all tech savvy power users. So we're able to manage all of this ourselves fairly smoothly because we all have lots of good experience with this sort of environment. And, we've built it out ourselves, so we know the ins and outs of how our different tools work and that sort of thing. And we've created some of our own tools. I guess I said everything's running on Linux with a couple exceptions, like this computer over here. This is running Windows 11. This is one of our test computers that we use to test, to test deployments of our software that we're working on and all that sort of thing to make sure it's going to work on our customer's computer before we just throw it on our customers' computers. But otherwise, everything runs Linux. And one of my customers the other day that was having problems with their Microsoft Exchange email was asking, we were having this conversation and was asking, well, I mentioned that we were all open source and that we didn't use Microsoft. And she was kind of confused. She's like, well, what do you mean? Why don't you use Microsoft? And how are you able to still work with us when we're using Microsoft? And that's the other thing is a lot of this open source software has gotten to the point where it's very seamlessly compatible with a lot of the Microsoft stuff, the Google stuff, the Apple stuff. It's gotten a lot better than it was when I first started using Linux and open source software as a hobby many years ago. But again, this sort of setup works for our office. It doesn't generally work for less tech savvy offices, just because it is more to manage. If you have all your own infrastructure, you have to manage it all. The other thing is just the familiarity. Everybody's been using Windows and Microsoft Office for decades at this point in office environments. And so the transition from being in a Windows environment to like a Linux environment it's quite a bit different. It has gotten better, but it's still quite a bit different. And so I think for most mid-size and larger businesses, unfortunately, Microsoft Windows and Microsoft Office, they're still the right choices as long as you use that hybrid approach that I talked about earlier, where you are not completely relying on the cloud to serve all of your files and all of your software. Now, for smaller businesses, an open source office might actually be a good option. And I mentioned the e-waste earlier too. The reason we have so much e-waste right now, and here's the thing is most of the e-waste isn't old junk that is busted or, stuff that's 20 years old or whatever. Most of it is, computers that are completely fine, completely reliable, spec'd out pretty good. And the only reason we have them is because of the upgrade or the cutting support for Windows 10. And now Microsoft cut support for Windows 10 and is pushing Windows 11 and has the requirements set for Windows 11 the way it does because of they wanted to raise the bar as far as security. At least that's what they claim. And I think they have achieved that to a certain extent with some of their requirements. But I wonder too if we haven't reached a point where computers aren't really, at least desktop office computers aren't improving by leaps and bounds like they used to. I remember when I had wasn't my first computer, it was second or third computer, I had an AMD K62 processor, which is ancient. nowadays. But I remember the jump from that. I went from that to a Pentium 4, and that was a huge improvement. And then I went from a Pentium 4 to a Core 2 Duo, and that was a huge improvement. And these processors, they only came out a few years different. Well, the K62 to the Pentium 4 might have been a little bit bigger leap, but the Pentium 4 to the Core 2 Duo, it was a vast improvement, and it was not released. The Core 2 Duo was not released too far after the Pentium 4. And then we got the Core i series from Intel. The first Core i series processors were awesome, and we got really good improvements each time they would release a new series, a new generation, until maybe 5th or 6th generation. I feel like the 5th or 6th generation Intel Core i processors that's kind of where it started to plateau. There are still incremental improvements, but not as much, especially with the last few generations. From like the 10th generation on, I feel like they're basically all the same chips, at least as far as office work goes. And for most office-related workloads. And so part of me wonders, maybe I need to put my tinfoil hat on, but part of me wonders if, because of the slowdown in improvements with these computers, people weren't replacing their computers as often. And so Microsoft and maybe some of the computer manufacturers decided that, well, we need people to buy computers to help our businesses survive instead of changing their business model. And so then they, make the cutoff with Windows 11. The cutoff is 8th generation Intel processors, and I think 3rd generation AMD Ryzen processors. And these computers that are running earlier generations, 5 and 6 and 7, they're still plenty good computers, but they won't officially run Windows 11. Now, there are some registry hacks. There are some installation ISO hacks that you can do to get Windows 11 to run on these older computers. But then you don't get any support from Microsoft. Not only that, but if you have one of these old computers that's older computers that you've hacked to run Windows 11, what's to say that Windows doesn't push, or Microsoft doesn't push an update to Windows 11 in the future that just basically locks your computer and says, sorry, your computer isn't compliant. You are no longer, you can no longer use your computer, or you're no longer going to get security updates. You have to buy a new computer. It's a very real possibility for the future. And so that's also one of the reasons why we aren't a Microsoft shop. With all this e-waste, what are we supposed to do? I mean, we can put Linux on them and get them running just fine. And we've done this for a couple of our clients that are interested in it. We've put Linux on them, a really friendly distro like Linux Mint, and we deploy it in their environment. And if they're not doing any sort of super heavy work, like we have a client that we just recently put a couple Linux computers in that were part of our e-waste pile, that we were just like, you know what, you can have these because they're just taking up space. They needed some more computers. They were a nonprofit that didn't have a huge budget for computers in general, so we deployed those there. They're working just fine because most of the time they're doing very simple things like emails, spreadsheets, and very simple spreadsheets. But yeah, this whole idea of a free open source office environment, I think could work really well for smaller businesses, but it's going to be a big learning curve. It allows you to own your data completely. Again, it's very compatible with Microsoft, Apple, a lot of that stuff now. And it cuts down on e-waste. It makes your old computers still run better. And it's just as secure, sometimes more secure, depending on how you configure it, than running Microsoft Windows or Mac OS. And your information and telemetry data isn't going to be sent to some other company. Well, okay, I'm done just rambling on about all this, but let me know what you think. Let me comment down below or something. What do you think? Is running an open source software and open source operating system something that's viable for your average everyday business? Or is this something that, should still only be regulated to businesses like ours where we know what we're doing? What's your experience with Microsoft and Google and all these other big tech companies? And let me know, how do you have it set up in your environment? Are you completely on premises, you completely in the cloud, or are you some sort of hybrid? Let me know, and thanks for watching. Let me know if you want more just kind of off the wall, unscripted videos like this. We'll see you in the next one.